ANC, well, let me say this from 1994, because I was one of those involved. I would say we were rather naive. I would say there was too much of a complacency. We had toppled apartheid. We'd come to power. We wanted to do the right things. We wanted to do the good things. We had accepted, and this I think we need to realize, that there was a compromise that was required, that it wasn't the ANC simply taking power through a social revolution, which is what we had set out to do. And what we thought that the only way to dislodge apartheid was going to be in a mass people's insurrection. We were taken aback, although Dambo leadership and the Harare Declaration didn't say there was going to be an impossibility of negotiation. And we saw that taking place. And of course, that had to be welcomed. You know, if you don't have the power on the battlefield and the forces where you can say, we'll sweep to power and then we will dictate to the old ruling class and its constituency, then there had to be some level of compromise. And I think that Mandela, from a prison cell, was far ahead of the rest of us and had an incredible insight, and that did save much blood flowing. However, CD, when I say complacency, naivety, the moving into compromise, I think we did too easily. We gave too much to the economic power base of the country. And then you saw enormous compromises made in relation to how we would change the economic power relations of this country. And that, I would say, is the root cause of the fact that instead of carrying on business that had presided in this country, those old colonial and then apartheid relationships, instead of radically changing those, and I use the word radical here in a sensible sense of not destroying security of food and land and ownership and things like that, but of changing the economic system, the control of corporate power, corporate companies, the way of doing business. The ANC started with an RPD, which was very positive, but it soon faded away. And we started having the GEAR program, which was what made Mbeki so unpopular with Kusato and the SACP, and led to his undoing, by the way, and was not an economic system that was really able to radically deal with what Mandela said was our priority, and that was changing the lives of the poorest of the poor. So as the country continued with that kind of economic system, so we began to see the rolling out of the widening of the huge gap between the haves and the have-nots. And the fact that as we speak today, and what I would say is the root socio-economic cause, explaining why there's been such a huge development of such looting in a spontaneous sense, is because that gap widened. With it widened unemployment, joblessness, inequality, and so on. And that's what the country is grappling with. You then link in the political schisms, because in the situation I've been contextualizing, and the beginnings, which I've already referred to, of Mbeki's unpopularity, because he failed to take into account the position of labor, of the working class, of Kusato, the Communist Party, and that's a very important constituency of the country. And there you began to see schisms taking place which are, by the way, unforgivable, the way I would say the elements which at the time we're talking about the alliance, we're talking about Vavi's Kusatu and Zimandi's Communist Party, linking in with opportunistic elements within the ANC who were moving against Mbeki for personal reasons. I would say in the extreme, the way he had marginalized certain people, certain leaders, Ramaphosa, Sekwali, Matthews Poza, and others who called themselves the Walking Wounded and the coalition of the wounded, as you call it. And that's where Zuma played his cards about being a victim, about Mbeki blocking him from becoming president, and he played on that particular element of the ANC which wanted to see Mbeki dislodged, and that was the coming together of awful, opportunistic right-wing elements within the ANC and the left, which is what led to Polokwane, and then the disastrous years of Zuma and the Guptas and state capture, which then followed, which are the basis then of what's been going on in terms of the support that Zuma has been getting from certain nefarious sources that are now being revealed as having been part of this absolute mess that has occurred, a criminal attempt to deal with the Zuma incarceration, to deal with Ramaphosa, to capture or recapture the ANC by these particular, I would say, counter-revolutionary elements.
Ronnie, tell me something. There's many things I want to pick at because you've now taken us to the political conversation. What makes the ANC so vulnerable to this, firstly? I mean, why is it so easy for people to take advantage, the opportunism to emerge, and for it to flourish the way that it has? And before you answer that, I want you to reflect on whether or not, as he is now incarcerated, has he done the same thing yet again? It sounds like that's what you're saying, that even behind bars, he's managed to take advantage of the state of the ANC once again to cause, I'm not even sure how to define this, as I said.
Yes, well, of course, to cause havoc. And that's been the approach of the Zuma faction, to create disturbance, to create havoc, to destabilize situation for political purposes, focused on Zuma's predicament, a deep, dark hole that he has been digging for himself with the stupid advice of his cronies who thought that they could play this game of resuscitating basically a dead and a broken man. Zuma's shelf life has run out. There's no
Why can't they
question.
see that?
Pardon?
Why can't they see that? I looked at Zuma on Sunday before he went to jail, before he was arrested, and I looked around. You speak about the alliance at a time where there was a Vavi, a Blade in Zamande, where there was a period where Julius Malema led. There was a stronghold of people who led very serious big structures who were on his side in the 2008-07 period that he no longer has. There's also that question around how powerful this man remains. I watched him on Sunday before he was arrested, and along his side was Carl Niehaus, Ace Makashule, and Tony Ngane. And that to me indicated that this man's time is up. Why can that not be seen? Why do we continue getting dragged into Zuma politics in 2021 where he doesn't have, supposedly, as much power when he was in power?
Yes, well, of course, he's lost power. He can never regain it. Zuma's actually a grotesque mediocrity. We've known that within the ANC from exile, actually. And it's unfortunate that Mandela ANC needed to have some, and I use the word unashamedly, it's an obvious identity issue of Zuma's Zuluness, which is played on It's not that the man tries to brush that aside. He always moves back into that particular pitch. And he plays that and has played it as much as he can. But he's lost power. He's lost patronage. You know, a politician without the power of patronage, of being able to give favors, of being able to buy people, which is basically how he developed from being just this mediocrity into somebody who had sycophants around him and saw in him the means in which they could graft their careers and could gain patronage, could gain wealth and power. That's gone. And you refer to those grotesque mediocrities surrounding him, from Ace to Carl Niehaus, in particular, Kebi Mafatswa. You know, these elements, they utter grotesque mediocrities who should never have had any public stage or profile. But Shakespeare has dealt with so many plays and epics which show those grotesque mediocrities and the absolute cunning they use and the way in which they can dissemble their lies and fool people. And what that crowd did, especially as Zuma, the arch target of corruption, was facing the possibilities of the law courts and Zondo. So those with him were being exposed, and for their own self-preservation, they sought using lies, using radicalism to build up a political platform around him. I would say that a silver lining of what we've gone through now and the exposure in which, according to the Intelligence Minister, the State Security Minister, Ayanda Dlodlo, who's someone I know, she's professional and she's experienced. I don't envy the fact that she's not presiding, as so many ministers aren't presiding, over really workable, functioning departments. But there is information that's clearly come to the fore, including from the social media, which points out to those absolute rogues who don't care about the country or our people. And they are being exposed now. And for the president and for cabinet in the ANC, they have to move forward. And we hope that what the Minister of State Security has been alleging is something that can be presented and people can be charged, and we can see an end game to the way in which these people have absolutely distorted the country, has brought us to such a horrible point in time. Let me just add now, when I talked about 2 provinces out of 9, the interesting aspect is that those are the 2 provinces where, in fact, the Zumaites and those that he's put in place in the state, fortunately many through Zondo and Ramaphosa having been pushed aside, like Tulani Glomo, who Zuma brought in to create a special operations structure within intelligence service serving him, which was illegal. And we know that there are such elements who have, according to the minister and according to social media, been pulling strings to bring about, as a lighting a fuse, the initial response to Zuma's incarceration. And that was the burning of some 20 or so trucks on the motorway from Durban to Gauteng last weekend. And of course, what then followed, I would say, is something beyond their script and beyond their any potential power. And that's a kind of insurrection bringing in millions of people who have, in a sense, simply spontaneously seen an opening in those two particular provinces to carry out spontaneous mass looting, which of course at the moment is the big danger, which the government have to put down and have to have the authority carried out on the streets by the security forces to push back the tide.